I offered my neighbor free help repainting his porch. He declined and laughed that I was trying too hard. A month later, my house was vandalized with paint, my camera wires were cut, and HOA violation notices piled up. But a paint can found in his shed had something inside that couldn't be explained. I live just outside Richmond, Virginia, in a neighborhood that pretends to be friendlier than it really is. If you've ever dealt with a homeowners association, you know the type. Perfect lawns, cookie-cutter houses, and neighbors who wave with fake smiles but gossip the second your garage door sticks. I've lived here 6 years. I keep my place clean. I mow every Saturday, and I don't throw parties or make noise. I mind my business. My wife passed away 2 years ago, so it's just me now. I mostly keep to myself. Trevor moved in next door about 6 months ago. Mid-40s, shaved head, drives a big black F-150 with dark tints. Right away I knew he was going to be trouble. His dog would come into my yard and crap by my garden. He parked across both our driveways like he didn't care anyone else lived here. And his music, loud, aggressive rap or metal at all hours of the night. Still, I tried to be decent. I noticed his porch was in rough shape, with splintering, old faded paint. I had a bunch of leftover supplies from when I repainted mine last summer. Brushes, primer, good quality weatherproof paint. I figured maybe if I offered to help him fix his up, it'd ease some of the tension. I was trying to do the right thing. I walked over one Saturday morning and said, "Hey man, I've got extra paint and tools. If you want to fix up your porch, I don't mind helping." He just stared at me for a second, then laughed. "You serious?" he said, loud enough for his friends, 3 guys standing around his open garage drinking beer, to hear. "You trying a little too hard to be Mr. Rogers over here." They all laughed. Hard. Like I was the punchline of some joke. I stood there for a second. I wanted to say something, but I didn't. I just nodded and walked away. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. About a month later, I woke up to the sound of my neighbor on the other side knocking on my door. She pointed to my garage door. I came outside and just stood there staring. Someone had splattered paint across it, gray with red mixed in. It looked like they just threw entire cans at it. My front porch was hit too. Paint all over the steps, railing, and even the welcome mat. Big thick streaks. Not random. Not kids messing around. This was personal. I went to check my cameras. All of them were dead. Not offline. Wires had been cleanly snipped. Motion lights? Broken. The glass was shattered and left dangling. I couldn't even process it. It was early. I hadn't had my coffee yet, and I was standing there with dried paint on my shoes, wondering what the hell I did to deserve this. Then the HOA letters started coming. First one was a warning, then a fine, then another. 4 notices in total, each one more aggressive than the last. They gave me 14 days to remedy the unsightly damage or face additional fines and a possible lien. I hadn't even done anything, and I was getting penalized. I knew it was Trevor. I couldn't prove it, but I felt it in my gut. No one else had a reason to mess with me. I don't talk to anyone else around here, and nobody has ever had an issue with me until he showed up. But with no cameras and no witnesses, the police didn't care. They took my statement, gave me a case number, and said unless I had video or caught him in the act, there wasn't much they could do. That didn't sit right with me. So I started watching. Every day after work, I'd sit in my car for about 20 minutes before going inside. I parked in the driveway with my seat tilted back just a bit, watching his house, watching his shed. That shed was the key. About 2 weeks later, I saw him take a half-full paint can from the back of his truck and carry it into his shed. He left the door wide open. I leaned forward and saw the label. The brand was the same as the paint I had on my garage. Not common paint you'd pick up at Home Depot. This was specific stuff from a local supplier in Mechanicsville. I remembered it because I'd used it myself. The next morning, when I knew he'd be at work, I walked over. The shed was locked, but not well. The hasp screws were stripped, and I could pull it just enough to wedge it open with a flathead. I didn't go in to steal anything. I just needed to know. Inside, on the shelf, was the can. I pried it open. There was paint still inside, gray mixed with red. I stirred it, and something shifted inside. I used a stick to pull it up. It was a broken plastic piece from a motion light. Same shape as the cover on mine. There was a glove stuck to the side of the can, dried into the paint. I looked around and saw the other one on the floor near the wall, next to a coil of black wire. I didn't take anything. I just took pictures. I documented every inch of it. Then I locked the shed exactly how I found it. That was the moment everything changed for me. I stopped feeling scared. I stopped waiting for someone else to fix it. I knew what I was going to do. He wanted to start a quiet war. He had no idea who he picked. After I found the glove and broken light cover in Trevor's shed, something in me hardened. I wasn't just angry anymore. I felt sharp, focused. I realized I'd been treating this like a misunderstanding, a bad neighbor situation. But this man came after me, on purpose. And he wanted me to suffer quietly while pretending it was all just coincidence. I didn't call the police with the photos right away. I knew if I went to them without something ironclad, it'd go nowhere again. They'd say, anyone could have dropped those items. I needed more. So I started keeping a notebook. Every time he did something off, I wrote it down. Dates, times, what I saw. I took pictures of his truck coming and going, especially when he had buckets or tools in the bed. I even bought a cheap GoPro clone and set it up inside my garage window, pointing toward his house. Hidden, motion activated. About a week later, I got footage. It was 2:13 a.m. on a Tuesday. The camera caught him walking between our yards. He wasn't on my property, but he was close, carrying what looked like a flat box and a small bucket. I zoomed in and recognized the bucket. Same gray lid. I checked my yard the next morning and found a long scratch across my vinyl siding. Fresh. Too high to be from a lawnmower or anything natural. That was strike two. Then the noise started. Every night for a week, around 1 or 2 a.m., he'd play music, just loud enough to wake me but low enough that calling the police would seem petty. Always something bass-heavy, repeating one line or verse again and again. Psychological warfare. I'd try to sleep through it, but I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, fists clenched, stomach tight. I was losing rest, losing focus at work. And the HOA? Still sending me notices. Still hitting me with fines. Still no help. I appealed one of them and got a one-sentence email. All homeowners are responsible for the appearance of their property. Meanwhile, Trevor's place looked worse than ever. Chipped paint, weeds, trash cans always left out. But no violations. Not one. Then I found out why. One day, I noticed a gray Nissan SUV parked in front of his house during the day, usually around lunch. A woman would get out, go inside for 30 minutes, then leave. One day, I saw her putting on an HOA badge lanyard before she drove off. I looked her up, Melissa Chambers, HOA compliance manager. I don't know if they were sleeping together, if he was blackmailing her, or if he just knew how to manipulate her. But that explained a lot. Now it wasn't just personal. It was political. He had protection. So I changed tactics. I started making friends. I introduced myself to my neighbors. People I'd barely spoken to in 6 years. I offered to mow lawns for the older couples, helped a single mom fix a fence panel. Quiet stuff. Helpful stuff. And every time I did, I made sure they knew why. Trying to stay out of trouble with the HOA, I'd say. Trevor's got it out for me. They'd look surprised at first, but then they'd share little things. He borrowed a pressure washer and never returned it. He backed into someone's mailbox and denied it. His dog chased a kid on a bike last summer. Bit by bit, I started building a network of people who didn't like him. Then I filed a formal complaint, anonymously, against Melissa Chambers. I included timestamps of her car parked at Trevor's during work hours. I included photos. I didn't accuse her of anything directly. I just asked if it was standard practice for HOA staff to spend extended time at a homeowner's private residence during business hours. I sent it to the HOA board, not her. And I didn't stop there. I printed out color photos of Trevor's trash-strewn side yard, broken fence, and crumbling porch. I put them in envelopes and delivered them to every house on our street with a note. If this was your house, how many fines would you have? I never signed them. I didn't need to. By the next week, 3 new violations appeared on Trevor's door. And Melissa's car? Never came back. That was the start of his unraveling. But I wasn't done yet. After those violation notices showed up on Trevor's door, something changed. He didn't throw a fit or rip them down. He didn't storm over to my house yelling. He just got quiet. Too quiet. I didn't trust it. For a few days, his music stopped. His dog stayed leashed. He even trimmed the overgrown weeds in front of his porch. It looked like he was backing off. But I've been around long enough to know, when someone like him goes silent, they're planning something. And I was right. About a week later, I got a letter taped to my front door. Not from the HOA. Not from the city. From a private law firm. Trevor was filing a civil harassment complaint against me. He claimed I'd been surveilling him without consent, slandering his name among neighbors, and invading his privacy. He said I trespassed into his shed and that he had footage of me doing it. I read the letter twice, heart pounding. I'd been careful, but apparently not careful enough. It was a bluff. I hadn't taken anything. But if he had a camera in the shed, or even a ring cam aimed that direction, he might have something. Enough to complicate things, legally. I called a friend from church who works in law and asked for advice. She looked over the letter and said it wasn't a formal lawsuit, just an intimidation tactic. But if I pushed too far, he could make it into one. So I paused. I didn't stop, just paused. I kept the footage and records I had, but I didn't act on them. I stayed quiet. Meanwhile, Trevor started acting bold again. He put up new lights, fixed his porch, painted it with a color suspiciously close to mine, like he was mocking me. Then, one night, he hosted another loud garage hangout. Guys drinking, laughing, and I swear I heard him say my name followed by, "Old freak's gonna lose his house." That's when I decided I needed leverage he couldn't touch. The twist came from someone I never expected, Mrs. Delaney, 2 doors down. She's in her 70s, rarely leaves her house. But one morning while I was out weeding, she waved me over. "I heard what he's been doing," she said. "You're not the first." She told me Trevor used to live in Chesterfield, just over 20 minutes from us. Moved after a bad situation with neighbors and some kind of legal trouble involving property damage and insurance. She didn't know all the details, but she remembered his last name from an old HOA newsletter she still had. I asked if she'd mind showing me. She invited me in and handed me the newsletter. There it was, Trevor's full name, including his middle initial. I went home and started digging online. Took me 2 hours, but I found it. He'd been sued 3 years ago, civil court, for insurance fraud and vandalism. Apparently, he tried to fake storm damage to his own property and got caught. Neighbors had accused him of damaging their property to create a cover story. He lost the case. Settled. Moved a few months later. Suddenly, I understood who I was dealing with. Trevor wasn't just a bad neighbor. He was a habitual liar and manipulator who'd done this before. This time, he picked the wrong man. I printed out the court records. I made copies of his old address. I put together a dossier, timeline, photos, footage, prior lawsuit, even HOA complaints. I packaged everything in a neat file folder. And then I made an appointment with the head of the HOA board, face to face. That meeting changed everything. The meeting with the HOA board chair took place in a beige conference room inside a bank building 10 minutes from the neighborhood. No one else was there, just me and the chair, a guy named Brent who looked like he'd rather be on a golf course. I sat across from him and placed the folder between us. "I think your HOA's been manipulated," I said. He raised an eyebrow. I didn't wait for a response. I opened the folder and walked him through everything. Calm, factual, no drama. Photos of the vandalism, a timeline of the HOA fines, the favoritism from Melissa, the footage of Trevor walking behind my property, the gloves, the paint, and then, last, the civil court documents from Chesterfield. Brent didn't say much, just nodded, kept flipping pages. At the end, he asked one thing. "Do you have a copy of this I can keep?" "I have 5. He took one and said he'd bring it up with the rest of the board. I didn't expect much. But 3 days later, Trevor got hit. Hard. A formal notice from the HOA was taped to his door. Then another. Then a third. Violations, fines, demands for appearance improvement, and a disciplinary hearing scheduled within the week. But that wasn't the real hit. The real blow came from his job. See, one of the neighbors I'd helped, the single mom with the fence, turns out her brother works in IT security. We'd chatted a few times. She mentioned my situation, and one day her brother knocked on my door and said, I looked him up. He told me Trevor had lied on his employment paperwork. Said he left his last job voluntarily, but the truth, thanks to public court records, showed a different story. I gave him the civil case number from Chesterfield. He didn't say what he did with it. But a week later, Trevor's truck was parked all day. Every day. No more work from home hustle. No more late-night garage parties. No more smug looks across the driveway. And then came the screaming. One afternoon, windows open, I heard him lose it, yelling into his phone, cursing out someone named Melissa and blaming some old freak down the street for ruining his life. I stood in my living room and listened. Calm. Quiet. Then, as if it were all choreographed, 2 more things happened that sealed it. The HOA officially suspended Melissa. She was put under investigation for inappropriate conduct and bias. Her badge? Revoked. She disappeared after that. The county code enforcement officer showed up. Someone had filed a complaint about unpermitted electrical work in Trevor's shed. Wonder who? They inspected it, found violations, and issued him a fine plus an order to tear out the illegal wiring. Suddenly, Trevor wasn't laughing anymore. A few days later, a for sale by owner sign appeared on his lawn. Just like that. I watched him load up his truck with trash bags and furniture. He didn't wave. He didn't say goodbye. He just glared at me the way cowards do, like I was the problem for standing up. He was gone within 3 weeks. The night after he left, I poured myself a bourbon, stepped out onto my repainted porch, and just sat there. No music, no yelling, no paint, just silence. But the best part? The HOA sent me a formal apology 2 weeks later. Said my record was being cleared, my fines refunded, and my neighborly conduct recognized with a written commendation. A meaningless gesture, but I framed it anyway. Because I earned it. I didn't take revenge with fire or fists. I used facts. I used patience. And I waited just long enough for the truth to do what it always does. Come home to roost.